I'm pleased and proud to introduce Jennine Fox and her dissertation today. So Jennine, again, you'll have 45 minutes to present, and then your committee will ask questions, and then if there are any audience questions, we'll get to those after that. So Jennine's dissertation, is a really exciting topic, and it's titled Antecedents and Consequences of Perceived Value in Use of Augmented Reality. And so Jennine, take it away. Good luck.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Andy, for that introduction. Good morning. Thank you all for joining my dissertation final defense. I'm really excited to be able to share my research today. All right, before I begin, I'd like to thank my committee members, DBA program leadership, and my family for all of the support and guidance throughout the process, particularly Dr. Andy Dahl, who's my dissertation chair. Long process in guidance and feedback on my research throughout the entire program. Dr. Jimmy Peltier, a committee member, and Dr. Pavan Chennamanini, reader, that provided feedback and hopefully some direction for future research as well. And Dr. Praveen Parbatia, DBA director, for providing this environment for this DBA research. And of course, my family, who helped and supported throughout classes and throughout the dissertation process. Many of you know that a part of the DBA process, application process, is to indicate what research discipline you're interested in, what your research ideas are, and my research idea hadn't changed from that point. So nearly 4 years ago, as I was writing the application for the DBA program, I came across this quote, and as they say, the rest is history. So I'm here presenting my research on augmented reality in the online retail context. My dissertation is composed of 2 essays. Given that I already talked in detail about Essay 1 and the front-end development of Essay 2, I will cover those things quickly here in my final defense so I can spend more time on the analysis, the findings, my discussion, and conclusions from my research. I talked a little bit about my personal motivation for my DBA research, and so I also want to talk a little bit about the existing literatures in terms of background and motivation. Online retail consumers, they don't have the ability to visualize those physical characteristics of products in that online shopping space. They can't touch, feel those products, smell those products, and so retailers are looking to consumer-facing technology to be able to fill some of those gaps. I also looked at augmented reality technology in a different context, in that social media, Snapchat app, and approximately 300 million people engage with augmented reality on that app daily, which is about 71% of those daily active users. In that retail space, that is a different story. Only about 1% of retailers have adopted that augmented reality technology, and about 66% of US adults are unaware of, they've never used, or they have no interest in using AR when they're shopping. So looking at this research to try to answer some of those questions as to what that difference is. The overall literature review for my dissertation is my first essay. It's a systematic literature review of augmented reality and online retail. As I alluded to, there are a lot of digital buyers in the United States, and so e-commerce retailers are adopting those consumer-facing technologies, such as augmented reality, that can help consumers with some of those sensory information that's lacking in that online retail space. I did identify a number of existing systematic literature reviews regarding augmented reality, some more broadly in the marketing domain, in retail, and specific to online retail. That said, I did identify gaps in the existing systematic literature reviews and support for that need for an updated systematic literature review. The 2 in particular that are in the online retail retail context. They were both looking at just over 50 articles that were published through March of 2021. At that same time, research on the use of augmented reality technology in online retail was accelerating. And in addition, we're all probably very familiar with this little thing called the COVID-19 pandemic that started in early 2020, and that has changed consumer behavior with retail, specifically more consumers shopping online and also using that technology such as augmented reality to help in that buying journey. In addition, for retailers, there is a high cost of adopting augmented reality technology, and so looking at that existing research can help shed some light on what can be beneficial for retailers in adopting that technology. I did identify 116 new articles from April of 21 through March of 25 for that systematic literature review. My methodology for the systematic literature review was the scientific procedures and rationales for systematic literature reviews protocol. You can see the figure on the right of the slide here that goes through the three main stages of that protocol: assembling, arranging, and assessing, and each of those stages is broken into two additional sub-stages. I'm not going to address every single sub-stage here, but highlight some of the key areas of the methodology for my systematic literature review. So the research questions for my literature review, looking at really what are the key theoretical frameworks in that existing literature, what consumer characteristics have been researched, what methodologies have been commonly employed, and how has that AR literature evolved from those prior systematic literature reviews to the current time period. Again, looking at articles published between April of 21 through March of 25. Search keywords on the slide here. I did look at those other systematic literature reviews to make sure I covered all of the main keywords in that search, and the total number of articles returned from the Web of Science database search was 589. As an additional stage in that protocol, I then organized all of those papers with the following codes you see on the slide, and then I did go through each of those articles to look if there were articles that should be excluded from that systematic literature review, and ultimately the 116 articles that were included. As a part of that process, I looked at all of those codes and identified descriptive characteristics of those papers that I wanted to highlight. This is just a really brief summary of that descriptive review, and I specifically wanted to highlight the methodologies and statistical analysis techniques because that was related to one of my research questions. So you can see that information on the slide here. I also, one of my research questions was to identify those key theories in the existing literature, 91 theories across those 116 papers, primarily in technology acceptance, psychological theories, social theories, and then the stimulus organism response framework commonly used in that research. I also did a scoping review. I reviewed all of the definitions in those papers for the different components of that AR technology. Most of the definitions contain the three components you see on this slide here, that there are digital/virtual information/objects that are overlaid/superimposed or integrated, merged with the real/physical world/environment. That those components were consistent across the definitions, and many of the definitions also included that this happens in real time or that the consumer, the user, could interact instantly. Based on that scoping review, I did propose a definition of augmented reality, and I do want to remind you that that doesn't include some of the gaming apps like Pokemon Go or social media apps like Snapchat Lens. I'm more focused on online retail, so for example, Amazon's Room Decorator would fall under this definition. So that definition, again, highlighting some of those key components, augmented reality and online retail retail, an interactive, immersive technology superimposes digital content, such as an overlay in the user's physical environment in real time through those connected devices. I also developed a conceptual model based on the existing literature with the antecedents, moderators, mediators, and outcomes all grouped under similar categories. So those antecedents were grouped by technology factor, the constructs grouped by technology factors, AR quality, customer experience, moderators grouped by product characteristics and consumer characteristics, mediators really focusing on augmented reality as that central component, value, risk factors, and then outcomes being attitude constructs, behavior constructs, and decision-making constructs. Some of the limitations of this research, obviously excluding articles could limit the amount of insights drawn, even though I went through the systematic process of exclusion, inclusion to try to include the most relevant articles. Also, there's that evolving nature of technology. So what we know currently, or as of that systematic literature review, what we know today may be different tomorrow. Some of the future research identified through the systematic literature review is to explore the dark side of augmented reality technology, constructs such as perceived risk, performance concerns, and privacy concerns. Also considering the impact of AR technology on some of those macro firm level outcomes. A lot of the outcomes in those papers were related to purchase intention behaviors or attitudes towards AR, so things like firm performance could be relevant to study. From a methodological perspective, using fuzzy set qualitative comparative analysis as a method, as you can see, as a method of analysis, as you could see from that conceptual model, there were a lot of different constructs that are possible antecedents, and so this as a statistical technique can have some promise in helping identify those complex configurations of factors that would lead to those outcomes. And then also to continue to look at technology acceptance. One of the key pieces of information I led with is that retailers and consumers aren't adopting AR technology in this online retail space. And so what are some of those factors in technology acceptance that can lead to behavioral intention to use and to make purchases and so on. Contributions of this research include that I highlighted the diversity and sheer volume of theories. I identified those key methodological approaches, suggested that up-to-date conceptual framework that extended and integrated those 91 different theories across that framework. And then I also included consumer characteristics. And as I get into essay 2, I'll talk a little bit more about why that's important in this space. And then I identified those theoretical gaps and underexplored areas. All right, so then jumping into essay 2, that is specifically looking at antecedents of the perceived value and use of augmented reality, and this is an empirical study. Again, some of the background for this particular essay is that those technology innovations continue to change retail. Augmented reality technology gaining traction, though under adopted compared to other contexts, so we can't just assume the old adage, build it and they will come. We do need to look at that technology may not be aligned with the task that the consumer is trying to accomplish, such as shopping online. Again, that same stat just showing that under adoption in that online retail space. Some of the gaps that I identified in this stream of research is related to service dominant logic. Consumers perceive and determine value based on value and use. However, this is a new digital service, augmented reality technology, that again, not heavily adopted in the online retail space. So consumers do need to make judgments about how that digital service will provide that value and use. And so that anticipatory value and value co-creation and value in use has not been researched in the retail or the online retail context. Some specific gaps, so service dominant logic, again, that value is perceived based on value and use, consumers needing to make judgments before they actually use the AR technology, and also then looking at that task technology fit and misfit, which you'll see in a moment is the main independent variables in my research. There has been research regarding task technology fit in the AR context, but the multidimensional task technology misfit is an emerging extension of that task technology fit framework, limited empirical testing overall, and none in the online retail AR context. All right, so research questions here, really looking at the impact of task technology fit and misfit on perceived value and use of the AR technology in online shopping, what the role of anticipatory value co-creation is in this process, the impact of consumer factors such as consumer innovativeness and privacy concerns on the relationships between task technology fit, misfit, and that perceived value and use. So literature review specific to this essay, looking at service dominant logic and AR value and use perceptions. Service, again, the fundamental part of the exchange and the co-creation of value. It includes multiple actors creating value through operant and operand resources, and that will come back again when I talk a little bit more about my hypotheses and my model. And consumers perceive and determine value based on value in use, so actually using that technology. So then the extension of value in use, looking at that anticipatory value in use, that value in use can be imaginary, that consumers need to make judgments about those digital services that they haven't experienced to provide that value in use. And there has been research in this area in the healthcare context, prior to and post the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, and there is a similar shift in to AR technology for consumers for online shopping during that COVID-19 pandemic and beyond. Task technology fit is the degree to which that technology assists that individual in performing their set of tasks, really looks at how that the technology capabilities align with those users' task requirements, and then when that technology does fit that task, it enables that task performance. Task technology misfit is not simply the opposite of fit. It is a proposed extension of the task technology fit framework, but it does propose that misalignment happens or can happen in distinct ways, so that the technology may provide insufficient functionality, coined as too little, or excessive unnecessary features, coined as too much. And really each of those types of misalignment can affect those user responses and outcomes differently, which has been studied or illustrated in existing studies as well as this research. Task technology misfit prior to this essay too has not been investigated with AR technology. And then kind of bringing it all together, so different frameworks at the basis for this research, so service dominant logic plus task technology fit and task technology misfit. I mentioned those operand resources fundamental to that service dominant logic, and technology constitutes those key operand resources. AR technology can help consumers complete their task of online shopping. If that AR technology does fit the task of online shopping, can lead to improved outcomes and greater alignment between those task needs and technological features, enhance the technology usefulness in those operand resources in that the value creation process. And then also looking at misfit explicitly accounts for those different forms of misfit, the too little, too much, between the consumer's task needs and the features of that technology. I also looked at consumer characteristics, consumer innovativeness, and privacy concerns, those personal traits and perspectives of individual consumers, important factors when assessing technology and its adoption, and they are also operant resources in that service dominant logic. Consumer innovativeness and privacy concerns have been studied in the, with augmented reality technology, consumer innovativeness as a moderator, and direct effects, as well as privacy concern and direct effects on outcomes in that space. I have a visual of my model to start with so you can kind of orientate yourself when I do talk a little bit more about my hypotheses development. So service dominant logic is that overarching framework. So you can see task, technology, fit, and misfit conceptualized as those operand resources, the consumer characteristics as operant resources, including the value co-creation as a key mechanism in the model through which the impact on value and use perceptions. I also have a number of control variables in this research as well. So I'm going to go over the hypotheses again fairly quickly because I already covered them in the hypothesis development in my proposal. So the first hypothesis is the levels of task technology fit positively associated with levels of anticipatory value co-creation of AR technology. Hypothesis 2, the levels of task technology misfit negatively associated with the levels of anticipatory value co-creation of AR technology. Hypothesis 3, that the levels of anticipatory value co-creation positively associated with the levels of anticipatory value and use of the AR technology. Hypotheses 4 and 5 are that task technology fit has a positive indirect effect on anticipatory value and use through anticipatory value co-creation. Task technology misfit has a negative indirect effect on anticipatory value and use through anticipatory value co-creation. And hypotheses 6A and 6B, level of consumer innovativeness moderates that relationship between task technology fit and value and use, such that that positive effect of task technology fit on value and use is stronger at higher levels of consumer innovativeness compared to lower levels of consumer innovativeness. The level of consumer innovativeness also moderates that relationship between task technology misfit and value and use, such that the negative effect of task technology misfit on value and use stronger at lower levels of consumer innovativeness compared to higher levels of consumer innovativeness. Hypotheses 7A and 7B, the level of privacy concerns moderates the relationship between task technology fit and value and use, such that the positive effect of value and use stronger at lower levels of privacy concern compared to higher levels of privacy concerns. The level of privacy concern moderates the relationship between task technology misfit and value and use, such that that negative effect of task technology misfit on value and use stronger at higher levels of privacy concern compared to lower levels of privacy concern. Again, you can see visually then how these hypotheses fit into that overall model. Oops. All right, so then going into the methods for essay 2, research, design, and data collection, quantitative, survey, cross-sectional. Respondents were randomly assigned to one of two product conditions. So all of the task technology fit and misfit questions, the respondent was either told to answer those questions as if they were shopping for jeans in online retail, or they were shopping for a sofa in online retail, and that was accomplished using the randomization function in Qualtrics. Data collection process, created that survey in Qualtrics, obtained IRB approval. I did do a pilot test recruiting undergraduate students, and then the main study, study 1, recruited Amazon Research Cloud respondents. Sampling design, populations, US consumers who shop online, so pretty broad population. Sampling design was non-random for the pilot test. Students were recruited for that via convenience sample, and then respondents were recruited via Amazon Cloud Research for more generalizability. Sample size, looking at the rules of thumb, 5:1 or 10:1 for items to respondents. I had 55 items, recommended that minimum sample size between 275 respondents and 550 respondents to have adequate statistical power. Again, you can see the measurement items here. I had 11 latent variables, 55 observed variables that were all adopted or adapted from valid and reliable scales. The control variables, again, age, gender, income level, and education level. The pilot study ended up with a sample size of 62 after removing any that failed attention checks and complete at least 40%, so on. And all of the, I used CFA to check construct validity and to check that those items met those cutoffs and those sorts of things before moving on to the main study data collection. Again, study 1, Amazon Cloud Research, ended up with a final sample of 300 respondents, used structural equation modeling for the analysis, specifically used smart PLS software for the variance-based structural equation modeling using partial least squares, path modeling method, and now the fun part, the results. I have the Fortner-Larker matrix for both products individually, so product 1 jeans and product 2 sofa. You can see that the diagonal entries that are in bold have the square root of the average variance extracted, and you can see that those are higher than the other constructs, which helps establish that discriminant validity. I also have the heterotrait, monotrait ratios, overall low, most less than 0.85. So again, constructs are distinct, also helps to establish that strong discriminant validity. So I have I have a lot of information on the slides that follow. I have construct definitions, I have measurement items, factor loadings, means, standard deviations, reliability statistics such as Cronbach's alpha, composite reliability, and row A, average variance extracted, helping to demonstrate that convergent validity. All of the values exceeded those standard cutoffs, specifically greater than the 0.7 for Cronbach's alpha, and row A, many even substantially higher than that at 0.9 or higher. Perceived value in use is the main dependent variable. It is it's composed of 5 dimensions, formative dimensions: convenience, hedonic, proficiency, self-expression, and social. So I have all of those statistics for each of the dimensions here on the following slides. I will go quickly through those slides, and if there are questions following my presentation, happy to jump back to those slides. So the first dimension, convenience, the user appreciates a comfortable and carefree usage as well as convenient handling. Again, you can see all of those statistics here on the slide that they exceeded those cutoffs. The next dimension, hedonic, the user wants to have fun, enjoy entertainment, relax from stress. The next dimension, proficiency, user wants to be constantly informed. He or she wants to enhance knowledge, be up to date, know what is happening around him or her. Self-expression, user wants to be perceived as seen by others. User wants to show others what he or she is like and satisfy the need to communicate. Oops. Too quickly past the last one here, social value. The user appreciates interaction with social contexts. User wants to maintain relationships, keep contact with friends and family, and communicate with them. Task technology fit, again, you can see all of the statistics on the slide here. This is one of the independent variables, refers to the degree to which a technology's capabilities align with and support the requirements of user tasks, thereby influencing user responses and performance. Task technology misfit, again, that misalignment between the requirements and technology, task requirements and technology features, but it is, can either happen when there are too many features or too few features. And so you can see both of the dimensions of task technology misfit on this slide as well. Value co-creation is the main mechanism through which the task technology fit and misfit impacts perceived value and use. In service dominant logic, value co-creation involves actors such as consumers and organizations or service providers mutually creating value through operant and operand resources. Consumer innovativeness and privacy concerns are those moderators. Consumer innovativeness refers to an individual's tendency to adopt and experiment with new technologies, with some consumers being more open to innovation while others are more resistant to change. And privacy concern defined as the consumer's worry about the consequences of sharing their personal information, for example, images of themselves, their physical space, or other personal information. I did run some sample t-tests on the construct means between those, the respondents that answered the questions about shopping for jeans in online retail versus shopping for a sofa in online retail. And a couple of the things that I want to highlight are that there were not statistically significant differences between consumer innovativeness and privacy concern, which is a good thing. It hopefully helps support that randomization functionality in Qualtrics worked as it should, because we weren't seeing significant differences between those self-reported values of the respondents on their levels of innovativeness or privacy concern. We did see statistically significant differences in task technology fit, misfit, and in the too much or too little in the responses to based on those products, again, jeans or sofa, which again, a good thing. I also ran a chi-squares test on the respondent characteristics across the two products. Again, no statistically significant differences. So again, supports that randomization functionality in Qualtrics was working as hoped. All right, so some additional results here are squared values. Structural model demonstrates moderate to high explanatory power for anticipatory value co-creation and all 5 dimensions of value and use, across both of the products. So you can see the R-squared values on the slide here. Also getting into the hypothesis testing one more time, visualizing that model so you can see those hypotheses in that visual model again. I have a lot of statistics on the upcoming slides, so to try to make it slightly more digestible, I highlighted, shaded all of the paths that were significant. I do have a summary that follows, so really just going to go quickly through these slides, but you can see all of the analysis that looked at each of the individual dimensions of value in use with task technology fit, task technology misfit, both too much and too little, and then also, as we move forward here, those interaction effects of consumer innovativeness, interaction effects of privacy concern, and then those indirect effects through anticipatory value co-creation. So you can see some of the differences across those different products. All right, so this is the summary. I tried to summarize all of those individual paths to the specific hypotheses. So hypothesis 1, the impact of task technology fit on anticipatory value co-creation. In these slides, I really just highlighted some of the major differences. So there were no significant differences. Both of the products supported hypothesis 1 for that relationship. Hypothesis 2, there wasn't support for product 1 of jeans of the impact of task technology misfit on anticipatory value co-creation, but partial support for the sofa. Both were supported for the hypothesis 3, anticipatory value co-creation impact on value and use. For hypothesis 4, There was slight differences in terms of which of the dimensions were supported. For hypothesis 4, there was full mediation for the impact or the impact of task technology fit through anticipatory value co-creation on value and use. Partial support and partial mediation where there was support for the product 2 for SOFA. Hypothesis 5, not support for genes, and then partial support, full mediation, other than some partial mediation for the value and use dimensions of self-expression and social value. Hypothesis 6A, 6B, 7A, fairly consistent across the 2 products. 7B, that interaction effect on test technology, misfit on value and use. For product 2, the SOFA, partial support for that hypothesis as well. All right, I also ran a model comparison. Structural model comparison helped to examine the robustness and the explanatory power of those proposed theoretical relationships across alternate model specifications. In this slide, in the statistics here, I highlighted where there were similarities across the different model specifications. A couple things of note, the relationship between task technology fit on anticipatory value co-creation consistently was positive and significant. So that tells us that task technology fit plays a central role in driving that anticipatory value co-creation regardless of the product. Additionally, that relationship between anticipatory value co-creation on value and use consistently positive and significant as well. So anticipatory value co-creation is a key driver of value and use. Task technology fit impact on value and use is less stable, and it is differentiated across those models. So that task technology fit does have limited direct effects just on convenience, self-expression, and social value, and then the impact of task technology fit on value in use is largely indirect as well through anticipatory value co-creation. In task technology misfit, the too much impact on value and use is positive impact just on the dimensions of self-expression and social value for nearly all of the models across both of those products. So that tells us that overly complex or excessive technology may actually allow for expressive or socially important usage. And then task technology misfit with too little features or functionality. It has fewer significant relationships overall. Oops. And I just wanted to highlight here at the very end, I did also count up all of the significant paths compared with the total paths and calculated out the percentage. So this last model here is just looking at mediation. It doesn't include any of the moderating variables, and that has the highest percentage of significant total paths. So may suggest that that parsimonious model is the best model to use. All right, so getting into the discussion. Overall, the predictors and mechanisms driving value and use are contingent on product characteristics. I found that in the research. Task technology fit and misfit explain more variance in anticipatory value creation for product 2 for sofas than product 1 jeans. Across those different dimensions of value and use, there are differences in explanatory power between those products, with the biggest differences being in convenience and social value dimensions. Anticipatory value creation is a central mechanism through which the task technology fit and misfit shape the consumer's perceived value and use. Value for those emerging technologies are also realized through that anticipated engagement, not just actually using the technology. And then for simple products, so the jeans in this research, task technology misfit, largely inconsequential, but for those high involvement products, so in this research, the sofa questions, task technology misfit with too much or too many features or functionality, positive impact on value and use, but too little ends up having a negative impact. All right, so some of the theoretical contributions. Task technology fit can shape anticipatory value co-creation before the actual technology use. Prior research really focused on those performance outcomes after actually using the technology. So this research helped support that anticipatory value co-creation. It's a key mediating mechanism. So again, prior studies really looked at task technology misfit as the value being that direct consequence as opposed to through anticipatory value co-creation. Task technology misfit, too much and too little. Just that research in the AR domain, task technology misfit had a positive impact on value and use, dimensions of self-expression and social value, and too little features had a negative impact on anticipatory value co-creation and value and use. Product characteristics influence how that value flows through task technology fit, misfit through anticipatory value co-creation. So for product 1, task technology fit effects largely indirect. They rely heavily on anticipatory value co-creation. But for product 2, the sofa, task technology fit does have a direct effect on some of those value dimensions in addition to those indirect effects. And then conditional support for consumer innovativeness and privacy concern moderators. Some of those value amplification mechanisms, innovativeness, for example, separated from value suppression mechanisms. So in this research, privacy concerns, so that consumer innovativeness as hypothesized amplifies positive value realization from good fit, particularly for those dimensions of self-expression and social value. Privacy concerns, general dampener rather than a conditional moderator in this research. All right, and some of the practical contributions, retailers designing those AR experiences should align with the consumer's task needs to facilitate that value co-creation prior to purchase. For complex products, so in this research, the example of the sofa, more features can enhance that anticipatory value co-creation, but too few features actually dampen those value perceptions. And then also retailers should segment consumers based on innovativeness and privacy sensitivity. All right, so some of the limitations in future research. So in this research, only looking at 2 products, so a broader range of products could be researched in the future, looking at online retail and offline retail. I used a cross-sectional survey research design, so longitudinal or experimental designs could be used in future research. Model constructs measured with self-reported perception. So we could combine these with actual objective usage indicators, those that have used AR apps, are they heavy users, and all of those sorts of things. Task technology misfit, too much and too little, really still high level, right? What are too many features? What are too few features? So we could link specific AR features to those distinct forms of task technology misfit. Consumer innovativeness and privacy concerns are only a small number of consumer characteristics, so exploring a broader set of consumer characteristics in future research. And then this only looks at a single cultural and retail context, so exploring different cultural settings, retail formats, and regulatory environments going forward. All right. So in conclusion, this research helped advance the understanding of value creation of AR technology, looking at those product level comparisons, users shopping online for jeans versus a sofa, and then it also helps to extend the task technology fit theory with that important role of anticipatory value co-creation informing those value perceptions. I have a list of select references, and I would like to open up to questions from my committee first.
Really, really nice job, Jennine, in terms of a lot of information to get through in the 45 minutes. So great job there. So, I'm going to take a little bit maybe different approach than the other two committee members, in part because you and I have had lots of conversations. In fact, we started talking about this before you even entered the DBA program, right? We had a meeting and call to discuss kind of your research interests before you even started. So, I do want to go back though one thing and talk about why jeans and why sofa, especially for those in the audience. I know you explained it during the proposal defense, but why those two products? How do you think that lends itself to generalizing to perhaps other products, given you notice some product characteristic differences, and you said one of the limitations is I only investigated two products. So can you talk about that, kind of justify why you focused on those two?
Sure. So a couple of things led to looking at jeans and sofa in particular. So the systematic literature review helped identify products that were researched in existing literature, often either wearables or furniture, cosmetics. Those were the three kind of main broad categories of products that were researched in the existing literature. They work well with that augmented reality technology. You can either visualize furniture items in your physical space, you can visualize wearables on your person or cosmetics. Immediately ruled out cosmetics because we were looking at respondents of different genders, and so we didn't want that to end up impacting the results, focusing on cosmetic related products. Then looking at wearables and furniture items, looking at prior data collection, kind of a pre-test, looking at the results of the consumers, which products they found valuable in using augmented reality technology in the online retail space. And so jeans in the wearables category came up as a valuable product, as well as a sofa for a furniture item. And then it also allowed for something that was a little less lower involvement product in the jeans, and then it also was a higher involvement product in the sofa to help a little bit to generalize. Again, it's a limitation only looking at those two products, but to see what those differences were for that lower involvement product versus the high involvement product.
Great, thanks. So, you have three different theories that you're integrating. And so can you talk a little bit in terms of the value and go into that some more and where you see your greatest contribution across those three theories? So from a theoretical contribution perspective, what do you view as most important?
Sure. I think based on the research, really integrating the concept of that anticipatory value co-creation with the task technology fit and misfit. So in the service dominant logic, typically those operand resources impacting value co-creation and ultimately the perception of value in use. And so looking at this from an anticipatory perspective, those value perceptions happening before the actual use of augmented reality technology, but bringing it together with task technology fit. So how do those features, functionalities of the AR technology having either that fit or in terms of misfit, too much or too little features and functionality, impact that from the service dominant logic, that value co-creation, or in this case anticipatory value co-creation, and ultimately the value and use perception. So from a theoretical perspective, future research can continue to investigate this combined framework with other technologies in other contexts as well.
So shifting gears a little bit, thinking ahead, publication process. what do you view as, your best opportunity, I guess, in terms of let's just focus on SA2. What do you view in terms of changes you might need to make or things you might swap out in terms of, I know you collected other constructs, things you may need to modify before we would push this out to a journal?
Yeah, so the anticipatory value co-creation scale I adopted from existing literature in the healthcare context, and so it may not be quite as relevant to the online retail context. So I did, as you mentioned, collect data on a number of other constructs, including multi-dimensional co-creation. So that's probably one of the main changes that I would make. I did some preliminary investigation on the multi-dimensional value co-creation scales, general reliability and validity statistics, and I also did run the model in Smart PLS, and many of the paths are significant in a similar fashion to the other anticipatory value co-creation scale as well. So that would be one of the, I would say probably the biggest change that I can foresee. I did, again, look at a number of other constructs, and I've kind of swapped them out in the model to look for different relationships and different paths as well. But that's probably, if it's close to what I have already, that would probably be the biggest change.
All right, I'm going to do one more question. So there's a number of your fellow cohort members here in the audience, some, I think, additional upcoming cohort members. There's probably more watching online. What advice would you give to a student in the program, whether they're in their first year, second year, or even fellow cohort members that are getting close to being at the same stage?
Sure. I guess the hindsight is 2020 thought process here. So for folks in my cohort, they know very well that I came in with this idea. I reached out to you before the program even started and said, hey, these are my goals. This is what I want to do. I want to teach in higher ed, get a tenure track job. I need to publish. I need to do all these things to be able to have an opportunity to secure that sort of role. So I think for myself personally, one of my enemies was I was trying to be overly efficient, and that might sound counterintuitive because efficiency is great in completing the dissertation, right? But in my case, I was really hoping to have, SA1, SA2, almost ready to send to a journal by the time I was done with my dissertation. And in going through the process, found that goal of efficiency actually kind of bit me in the end, because I spent more time working on SA1, sending it to a journal, unfortunately getting rejected, and then being a couple of months into the process before, or the dissertation year before I actually really started to kick that dissertation into high gear. So I think, as everyone in the program has said all along, the best dissertation is a done dissertation. And in the last couple of months, that has been my mantra. Just need to get this thing done. And then I have the data, I have the connections with my dissertation committee to be able to continue to refine the research, to be able to send an article out to a journal.
All right, I'm going to turn it over to Jimmy.
Fantastic presentation.
Thank you.
I mean, you did a nice job in the proposal, but this is far superior to what you did in the initial proposal. So I am going to take on the role of a cranky reviewer. All right? So let's talk about, what a cranky reviewer might say. I mean, they probably couldn't say that you didn't do all the stats, that you didn't do comparisons, you did all the statistical things that need to be done. And that's, when I read your dissertation prior to you presenting, it's like, well, she isn't following the mantra. she's not, of get it done, because you went so detailed. So it was quite impressive. So if I'm reading, we have so essay 1, as is, yeah, you know, I felt pretty strongly it was not going to be accepted. I don't know where you sent it, but it doesn't add the value proposition. But you have all the information to actually turn it into one. Mm-hmm. Just not the scoping review and the quantifying, you know, it's more of, let's look at what's been done over time, mm-hmm. dig into, you know, the theories that have been done in greater detail, and then that kind of a paper could be published. So don't get dejected that it was rejected. It just wasn't ready in that format. I saw that you updated the sites a little bit, mm-hmm. but that's going to be something that's really critical, because in any newer field, you have to have real current sites. So you can't look at usage from like 5 years ago. That kind of stuff, it's just going to be a red flag. So let's you know, think about that. So in terms of your essay 2, a cranky reviewer might say, well, you know, how is this different from diffusion of innovation, technology acceptance, the TAUT, all those things. So when you answer the question, what might be the biggest impact in a journal, someone's going to hit you on that. You know, would you say you're just reframing some of this using different words?
Not necessarily. I don't have it all in the presentation, but I did quite a bit of looking into the technology acceptance, for example, for a prior paper that I worked on in the program. And so a lot of those constructs are just looking at general usefulness, for example, and so on. And so looking really at that fit between the technology, so the AR technology in this case, with the task of, in my case, online shopping, or if it was extended into just retail shopping in general, really helps to present a different lens and how that those value perceptions are formed through value co-creation and ultimately the perceived value and use of that technology, really trying to look at, I know I had conversations with Andy a couple of times of like, why don't people use this more in online retail? Because it seems like it would be so useful. And so really looking at some of those nuances across different products and across the fit of that technology with the task of online shopping to try to figure out what some of those reasons that folks aren't adopting augmented reality online shopping. I don't know if that totally answers your question as far as how it differentiates
well, not really,
from.
But it was interesting discussion.
Different.
So what you'll get is, well, how is it different? So a big part of your paper should be, how has this type of thing been studied?
Sure.
And explicitly, you explain why these constructs are, you know, where do they overlap and where are they differ? Okay. Because that's the technology part, the fit misfit is where your biggest contribution is. Value co-creation, that's studied like crazy. Yeah. Anticipatory value co-creation, so much of it is in that zone. So that's your big hit, you know, I believe, especially since things kind of work. Now in the diffusion of innovation literature, one of the things that they have is a compatibility. So the diffusion of a product from its launch to its end is really critical for your paper, because you're wondering why it hasn't been adopted. So which stage of the consumer adoption diffusion process, one of the things that they said was that gets adoption quicker is compatibility. So I would dig into the compatibility piece because that's tied directly to, fit. So I would continue to look at that as well. Now, Andy brought up the product category. So, and there were some differences in the product category, but not all that. There was pretty strong, and then the question is, why are they different? Well, you picked two different products. One is more hedonic, one is more utilitarian. So the jeans, are hedonic because they're social, and especially for women. Women spend a lot more time on jeans than do guys. And the sofa is more utilitarian. So I would really play with that a little bit. You pick two product categories, not just the involvement piece, but it's also what it is that they're, what kind of product it is. And then if you look at your results on where hedonic is significant in terms of, it can be explained through that. So I would dig really hard into why there's some differences, and I would suggest the use of these two products. Part of it was you wanted hedonic uses, versus utilitarian, and you did not want to have low involvement. Jeans are not low involvement. It's more of a moderate involvement, and if they're designer jeans, actually they've been shown to be high involvement. So I think there's some things there. The cranky reviewer would probably make you justify that. Okay. I really like the fact that a lot of your paths are not significant, because if everything's significant, it's what the hell's going on. So when you did your discussion and your dissertation, I think more time on why things are actually happened and why things didn't is really informative, because that really enhances your implications then, and enhances your future research, because maybe, it wasn't, measured exactly right. You use products. I think a future extension would be services too. Going in, I expressed to Annie that I didn't think your moderators would be all that strong. And moderators are hard to rest dissertation on, so people who are going to be following you. So it's always good to have moderators, but be expected that a lot of times they just don't show up. And you look at some of the other possible things that could be a moderator, and you put your slide up there. I think I would run every single variable you have sticking around and see if it works as a moderator. One is, I don't recall, do you have any involvement scales for how involving the jeans versus, because that's...
I do not. I
okay.
have, from a consumer perspective, task
so
focused.
That's definitely something that would... wasn't there a qualifier if they ever used AR?
Yes.
And I don't recall if you ran that as a moderator.
Not as a moderator.
Well, that's a really good possible moderator,
Sure.
because it's where are they in the adoption cycle? I think, wasn't there stuff on how familiar they are with AR?
Not a familiarity scale specifically. I asked about how often they shop online, which specific AR apps they've used, if they've used AR apps in the past. So have they used Snapchat? Have they used IKEA, Place, Overstock, Amazon,
So you could use that a 0-8 scale. 0, they don't use any. I would play around with that one. Self-efficacy, those kind of things.
Okay.
And then, were there any gender differances as a moderator?
There were no significant gender differences in terms of like I ran the a chi-squares test on
What I meant is use it as a moderator.
Oh, no, I have not. I use it as a control.
That may be useful, especially those two categories. Women tend to be more involved in jeans. By the way, they're more involved in sofa as well. So it'd be
Sure.
that would be interesting if there's real differences there. So I'd say big picture, there's multiple papers here. There's a revision of SA1. There's a multi-study, which you kind of presented. Having multiple studies is useful. I know you added AI questions. Mm-hmm. And I guarantee you something's going to pop there.
Yeah.
Something's going to pop there in terms of your actual models.
Right.
So, you know, it's a fantastic dissertation. Really good. Okay. Very impressive.
All right, it's my turn, and it's hard to go after two good set of commentators. So when I look at your hypotheses, right, and when we look at the final results, it seems like a lot of the hypotheses that were related to the task technology misfit, whether it's the too much or too little, those were the ones that were not supported, right?
Too little more so than too many or
Yeah.
too much for as far as the features.
Yeah, so those, the fit, the too much, too little, all those put together seem, somewhat a mixed bag there. And it's okay, I mean, it's not like a bad thing, but have you done any post-hoc analysis to kind of dig into that and see what's going on?
Not specific to the differences between task technology misfit, the too much and the too little. I did notice that, I guess, some of the interesting things related to the differences between too much and too little is that having too many features actually had a positive impact on value and use ultimately, but through anticipatory value co-creation for some of the products as well, especially sofas. So it would suggest that actually having a lot of features makes it look cool and neat, and so that it provides a perception of more value or more perceived value in use of that augmented reality technology, versus too little really had a minimal impact, and where it did, it was negative. So I think if folks are using the AR technology for their shopping tasks, they really want to see the bells and whistles versus like something that kind of helps a little bit, has a little feature. They actually want to see some of the details. And I wasn't able to find anything yet, but I'm planning to dig into in a little more detail. I do have a bunch of I had a bunch of questions about specific AR features, and so if there's some insights that can be gleaned from which of these features are, maybe help support that too much or the right features to have in the AR technology as well.
So I think you're working with some very difficult variables here, because if you look at task technology fit and then the misfit has two separate dimensions. Mm-hmm. The misfit is kind of the opposite of the fit, right? So it's easy if you have on let's say a 1 to 5 scale, right, a 5-point scale, if if there's lack of fit, right, let's say it's extreme, it's 1, then you can go look at the misfit. Is it too much, too little, right? And if it is high on the too much, and then really low on the too little, it's easy for the model to capture those effects and attribute those variances around those numbers. But when the fit is maybe a 3 or a 4, and then the variance in the misfit in which of those dimensions, so it's incredibly difficult for the mathematical model to capture and parse out and attribute the variances. So my suggestion is to go and look at your data, and especially because this is through Amazon Cloud research, mm-hmm. you would really want to do a crosstab on the pairs, the fit, and one of the dimensions of the misfit, and then also do the same thing for the other pairs. You'd want to see where there's some discrepancies, right? Let's say somebody rated really high on the fit and then scored also on the higher side on the misfit side. That's going to cause problems for you. I suspect if you take out these outliers and rerun the model, you'll get a whole different, better results. And my last comment is, again, the cranky reviewer, right? if you look at your hypothesis 2, for one of your products, it was supported. And for the second one, it was partially supported. Am I right?
I believe so, yes.
And then the partial support, the direction, it was significant on both, but on one of them, it was positive and significant. The other one, it was negative and significant. And your hypothesis was negative. And so it's okay to have a non-significant effect, but then all of a sudden you have an opposite direction effect that is significant, then a reviewer will question your theory.
Okay.
So that's where you got to be very careful in explaining that. And I suspect if you do what I'm suggesting on the fit and the misfits, and really figure out those outlying responses, and you run it on the other stuff, you may not see that. So I would strongly suggest you do that.
Will do.
That's all I have. And again, congratulations. Extremely well done. Presentation, research, write-up, everything was very good. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Questions from the audience? Anyone? Well, hang on. For those online.
Jennine, congratulations. I really loved your systematic literature review, and I thought you had a novel contribution just in your model. And have you ever seen a format like that done before in a systematic review? I had not.
In this area, yeah. So one of the systematic literature reviews more broadly in the like AR and marketing had a really similar format. They actually used that same protocol and they had a conceptual model, but it was just more broadly in AR and marketing, and it was an older systematic literature review. So the answer to your specific question is yes, I did see that in another paper, but it was distinct from the literature review that I did.
The fact that you brought those kinds of statistics into it and really linked it to future research was great. So, bravo.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? You know, cranky reviewers or committee members, maybe that's just our normal personalities, you know. Jennine, great job.
Thank you.
I think we're all set.